Picture this. You're out looking for a job and find a position at two research facilities. One located in New Mexico, built around an old missile silo, and the other in Upper Michigan, deep underground. Now, what are these research facilities dealing with? Teleportation, which could open the gates to interdimensional beings beyond our comprehension, inevitably leading to the downfall of humanity. Yeah, you know what? That doesn't sound too bad. However, when it comes to a safer or better workplace, which is the better candidate? Aperture Laboratories or the Black Mesa Research Facility? In today's video, we're going to look into 5 factors which will help us determine this. And before moving on, I would like to give a mention to fellow friend and content creator EDC in his video regarding the Half-Life and Portal series respectively, as well as their connections within the actual games. After this video is over, consider checking out his video and giving him the love and support he deserves. We've been hard at work with this collaborative project, and honestly, he's just been an amazing friend through and through. Anyways, the 5 factors which will come into play are daily life, food, hazards, history, and finally, chances of survival. Now, let's start with the first one, daily life.
Welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System.
As employees are required to live in the complex itself, Black Mesa contains many personal facilities, including laundromats, recreation and sports areas such as lounges, dormitories, food courts, swimming pools, cafeterias, and numerous vending machines. Employees at the Black Mesa Research Facility use the Black Mesa Transit System to get wherever they need to go, making travel much easier for employees. Another interesting thing to note is that the complex also has its own newspaper dubbed the Mesa Times, which is sold within the facility to inform the personnel about events within and outside of the facility. And despite the fact that the facility is located in the middle of a desert, the facility is constantly maintained at a pleasant
68 degrees at all times.
Overall, Black Mesa is almost as large as a city and is completely self-sustainable in all fields. Now, let's see how Aperture holds up. Not much is really known about the daily life of scientists or employee at Aperture Science before it becomes pure speculation. However, let's see some of the stuff that we do know about, such as the facility hosting many special events, such as Bring Your Cat to Work Day or Bring Your Daughter to Work Day.
That did not end well.
From what we've seen, there doesn't seem to be a transit system within the facility either, but it does host a series of many catwalks. Aperture is also known to be very heavy on surveillance, with some of the employees suggesting to put cameras within the cameras. At Aperture, your well-being isn't the top priority of the company, and the body count of Aperture probably dwarfs the total number of deaths during the Black Mesa incident. Speaking of deaths, there were a number of horrific incidents at the hands of mad AI that you would most definitely have to deal with. These incidents would eventually lead to the creation of the personality spheres. However, those did not seem to fully work, as we will see later on in the video. Granted, that's one thing to keep in mind while you stay at Aperture Science. For the most part, Black Mesa tends to make sure their employees are doing well, hence why it has many personal facilities to sustain employees' physical and mental health. Additionally, something interesting to note is that most employees probably had their own personal locker to store their belongings in, as shown in the library comic. Oddly enough, however, no cafeterias, food courts, or vending machines are seen within Aperture Science, but the employees seem to have eaten canned food amongst other things, which leads us to the second factor.
That you will be baked, and then there will be cake.
From the Ratman dens, we can see that Aperture Science manufactured foods such as beans, milk, and gallons of water. Coffee also seems to have been very abundant among scientists, considering how many mugs there are. And I can't talk about Aperture without mentioning cake. Cake is featured prominently, as well as it is promised by GLaDOS to Shell for when she concludes the test.
Cake and grief counseling will be available at the conclusion of the test,
as well as cake recipes being spewed out by the Intelligence Corps.
1 18.25 ounce packaged chocolate cake mix.
Additional fun facts relating to this topic is that the repulsion and propulsion gels were originally designed as dietetic substitutes, but eventually were shown to be toxic and pulled from the shelves and turned into testing elements. Actually, that doesn't sound that fun now that I mention it. Now, let's head over to Black Mesa. The Black Mesa Research Facility features numerous vending machines selling sodas or snacks. Let's see what Black Mesa employee Otis thinks of the vending machines.
Candy. Stupid machines. Why don't these ever seem to work? Hey, you wouldn't have a quarter
The research facility also houses a variety of fast food outlets, cafeterias, and coffee machines, as well as a walk-in freezer. Surprisingly enough, in this kind of workplace, beer is also known to be drunk by personnel, as security guards sometimes promise a beer to Gordon if they meet again.
Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer.
About that beer I owed you.
Donuts are also seen in Half-Life, with scientists mocking the guards.
Shouldn't you be guarding some donuts and coffee right about now? Yes, sir.
And speaking of the guards, which are there to provide security to the personnel, I don't think they're enough to prevent some lawsuits from occurring, which leads us to the third factor.
Or other hazardous materials in the course of your duties. Contact your radiation safety officer immediately.
Surprisingly enough, Black Mesa is filled with so many hazards that I didn't even consider until making this video. The type of hazards that we'll be looking into for Black Mesa are those that existed pre-disaster, otherwise this video would be way too long. Starting off, there are pools of radioactive acid throughout the facility, which they have exposed in several areas, even in the daily commute to work. There are also bottomless pits, which are pretty self-explanatory. Explosive barrels and boxes, ceiling turrets, Zen explosions, dangerous machinery, lack of handrails, which brings up another point of discussion. Despite Aperture Science being the contender with unethical experiments in mad AI, Black Mesa surprisingly doesn't have many handrails where there should be. And we can't forget about the aliens. Okay, well that alien wasn't there, but these guys were. On the topic of hazards, let's briefly go over the
Black Mesa Hazard Course,
which starts out fairly reasonable in the beginning, but there are certain moments where you question Black Mesa's ethics.
Now that you're up here, there's only one way down. Find the target on the floor below and do your best to hit it.
What is the point of possibly breaking a leg in the training course? There are literally bloodstains on the floor. Oh yeah, your skin MP5 was a grenade launcher attachment. This is a cool gun. I wonder how it works. Let's see. And honestly, this list could go on for even longer, but now we're moving on to Aperture, where we cannot go without mentioning the dangers of mad AI.
The moral of the story is all the humans are dead.
Bottomless pits much like Black Mesa, sentry and rocket turrets, pools of toxic goo, moving platforms, high energy pellets, thermal discouragement beams, emancipation grills, even the
Handheld portal device
could be considered its own hazard. From the blueprints, we can see that it seems to be powered by a black hole, which begs a question on how Aperture Science managed to fit a black hole inside the portal gun, as well as what would happen if such a device were to be damaged. In addition, the repulsion and conversion gels are both hazardous to test subjects and scientists alike being regularly exposed to them, with the repulsion gel being made out of an element that
does not like the human skeleton,
and the conversion gel being the more deadly latter of the two, due to it being made out of ground up moon rocks. This constant exposure to the moon rock formula would probably lead to the health deterioration of the CEO and their demise. In the course of the company's history, Aperture's had a myriad of posters which can range from reminders, countermeasures, to even propaganda. This subject is one that I feel can be mentioned, and thus we will start off with Know Your Chemical Hazards. For the kind of workplace that is Aperture Science, this poster isn't too out of the ordinary considering the track record that they're known for. Continuing on, there's Know Your Allergens. Here we have the usual, such as pollen, animal danger, and plastics. Oh wait, I almost forgot to mention antimatter, can't forget that. For those who are unaware, a gravity antimatter can produce an explosion the size of a nuclear bomb. Why this is listed as an allergen is beyond me. And as we continue on analyzing these posters, it begins to get more and more questionable. Remember, if your future you tries to warn you about this test, don't listen. What is this implying? Why would Aperture Science feel the need to inform you of the possibility of running into your future self? The implications of this is terrifying when reminded that this is the same company that felt the need to inject people with praying mantis DNA. Moreover, if Aperture reminds their personnel to alert their supervisors at the sight of any investigators, journalists, or even the police, then granted, there's truly something larger at play. The sketchiness that emanates from the workplace that is Aperture Science, along with the irregular occurrence of experiments going awry, is something that they have a great history of, which leads us to the fourth factor.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Aperture Science. You're here because we want the best, and you are it. So, who is ready to make some science?
It is absolutely crazy how many bad things occurred within Aperture's history. Say what you will about Black Mesa causing the end of the world, but Black Mesa didn't have tests going wrong left and right on a regular basis, or a mindset of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
I'll be honest, we're throwing science at the wall here to see what sticks. No idea what it'll do.
All of these tests, which are flat out absurd and senseless in nature, make you wonder what truly was the goal or point of conducting them. Most of the results gained from these experiments made in the name of science ended with people losing their lives.
Hey, you want to do something actually scientific?
Nah, not really.
Want to put somebody in front of a jet engine until they pass out from dehydration?
Alright, but who exactly do we plan to test this on? So, I'll be fine, right?
Power to stage 1 emitters in 3, 2,
Guys, don't let me out here like this. Are you guys sure this is safe? Guys? Come on! Get me out of this thing! Get me. And it doesn't just end there. One of Aperture's most infamous tests from the past was that of a research vessel named the Borealis, which
had simply disappeared, vanished, with all hands, and even part of the dry dock. Few believed the Borealis would ever be seen again.
Aperture Science time and time again really had no idea what they were doing, other than finding something that could lead them to the next scientific breakthrough that would put them in front of Black Mesa and change the future of humanity, even if it meant compromising ordinary citizens of risk.
Why is so much of our science dangerous? Why not marry safe science if you love it so much?
But wait, they did do that. It was none other than their greatest scientific breakthrough, the portal gun. But sadly, this never saw the light of day outside of Aperture Science due to being in testing for 50 years, regardless of the fact that they had essentially perfected it. The company had a track record of struggling financially and having the well-being of the personnel be a lower priority.
Bean Counter said I couldn't fire a man just for being in a wheelchair. Did it anyway. Ramps are expensive.
We can all point and laugh at how absurd or silly this sounds, but if you were an employee working there, having to deal with Aperture shenanigans day after day, you probably would not like it at all. And I could go on and on about Aperture's misfortunes during the company's history, such as Aperture Science proposing a substantial amount of ideas when compared to Black Mesa, yet receiving hardly any funding for it. But now, the history of Black Mesa is inbound, which turns out to be the more ambiguous and mysterious one of the two. Nonetheless, we can still talk about what we do know about. For instance, Black Mesa was built over several decommissioned ICBM launching and testing silo complexes during the 1950s. Black Mesa was also known to have a second base of operations in Eastern Europe, that base being White Forest Base, which was an aging Cold War base bought very cheap by Black Mesa to develop some projects in response to budgetary reasons, as well as to oversight problems associated with basing all their work in North America. Moving on, in the Blue Shift expansion, we get to see a very old sector of Black Mesa, built before the Lambda complex, which is where Black Mesa's first teleportation experiments took place, as well as older models for the HEV and medical chargers respectively. However, let's focus on the teleporter at play here. We first have to keep in mind that Black Mesa handles teleportation using Zen as a way to teleport within our universe. Think of it as a universal subway station, which means that Black Mesa had been dealing with Zen since the 70s, or for all we know, much longer than that. In short, Black Mesa had essentially allowed humanity to make first contact with extraterrestrial life, and would have kept it a secret for the incoming decades, which in turn launched years of scientific expeditions performed by survey teams tasked to study and collect data from Zen. As a result, many sections of the BMRF were dedicated to researching the Zenian wildlife, with the inclusion of zoos and other research areas. Also, on an unrelated note, we get to see a lot of older areas of the research facility, such as the decommissioned rail system and the flooded areas. But just from looking at the signs of disrepair and rust, which can only come from decades without maintenance, these areas definitely looked like this prior to the Black Mesa incident. However, some of these areas seem to be in use for something else. As mentioned prior, Black Mesa was also known to earn more funding than Aperture Science, despite Aperture being the one to propose more ideas. Thus, with the added benefit of being government funded, Black Mesa without a doubt developed weapons for the military. Imagine showing this to a board of executives and their reaction to seeing something like this.
Bro, we are funding this crap!
Sir, the weapon is known to combust the user who's holding it. We cannot fund something that puts others at risk. Like, take a look at this video of someone getting blown up brutally.
Did you see what it did to that helicopter?
Yes, but you have to understand that—
I don't give a flying f***. We are funding the shit out of this. I will use my kids' college money if I have to. This is the coolest thing ever!
Certain parts of the facility also seem to be outdated, with the inclusion of magnetic tape storage machines along with other analog machines in the facility, while other parts of it seem to be entirely new. Likewise, Aperture Science also seems to have older pieces of hardware alongside more modern ones. And yeah, that's pretty much what I could gather for Black Mesa's history. We hear so much about Black Mesa, and have many games taking place within it, yet we don't know much about its history, and we can only state so much before it becomes speculation. Regardless of that, what we do know for certain for both Black Mesa and Aperture Science is that both would have a very terrible and rather abysmal downfall, which leads us to our final factor. Now that we are in the final segment of this video, we're gonna see which one has a higher chance of survival when it comes down to their infamous disaster scenarios. Of course, Black Mesa is the first one that's up. It all begins with Black Mesa accepting the Zen crystal sample GG3AA3.
This is the purest sample we've seen yet.
On May 16th, in an ambiguous year in the 2000s, the majority of Sector C was in full preparation for the experiment, but was delayed due to a certain Dr. Gordon Freeman running late. With this delay, the science team was able to make preparations, including the decision to push the anti-mass spectrometer to 105% power. However, it would be met with skepticism from certain scientists and staff.
The administrator is a bureaucrat, not a scientist. I did not design this equipment to be run at such high intensity.
Eventually, now donning the HEV suit, Gordon arrives at the test chamber, pushing the crystal into the beam of the anti-mass spectrometer. And just then, in an instant, the immediate result is catastrophic, marking the moment of both the resonance cascade and ultimately the beginning of humanity's fight for survival. By rupturing the space-time continuum, extra-dimensional beings begin their incursion, attacking any Black Mesa employee on site that you and your fellow colleagues are going to have to deal with. You've got head crabs, which are parasitic facehuggers that latch onto your head, turning you into a zombie. You've got hound eyes that produce lethal shockwaves. You've got bull squids that spit acid and can maul you at close range. You've got vortigons that are capable of electrical shock tactics. And make sure to be careful where you step, because there could also be barnacles that can strangle you by the neck and eat you alive. And a bunch of other aliens like alien grunts, gargantuas, snarks, and the ichthyosaur, which lurks in the depths. Saying be careful where you step is a huge understatement. You're gonna have to run, think, shoot, and live. And you're not just going to be confronted with aliens, but also the incoming HECU military forces that were called in by Dr. Rosenberg. This simple call for help, however, wouldn't be taken away by the US government. That's right, it's not going to be a search and rescue mission anymore for you and your fellow colleagues. It's going to be a search and destroy ordeal. Being tasked with the cover-up of the incident, they will not bargain with you unless push comes to shove in the end. Eventually, the Xenian forces prove to be overwhelming towards the HECU forces, as they call in infantry and air vehicles for assistance. Over time, the once calm New Mexico surface would be filled with tension by the military, turning it into a war zone. However, due to the failure of the military's cleanup operation, Black Ops units were eventually sent over and tasked to plant and detonate a nuclear bomb to decimate the entire facility, as well as having orders to kill anything, human or not, in their way, and that's including the Marines. By this point, if you're still in Black Mesa after Gordon went through the Zen portal in the Lambda complex, then you're gonna have to deal with even more extra-dimensional visitors now that a mysterious alien faction is pouring in with full force. The remaining Marines that were left behind would have abandoned their mission and would presumably begin to partner up as a fellow personnel in the facility. And if you happen to do anything significant while surviving, like defeating a giant space baby, then this interdimensional businessman might take some interest in you. But chances are, you and your fellow coworkers are going to be every man for themselves. But hey, don't feel bad. If Isaac Kleiner was able to get out of there alive, so can you! Get out of there as soon as you can before the military arrives, before the Black Ops arrives, before Race X arrives, and before Black Mesa is nuked. And even then, despite all the odds against you, you have more of a fair chance of surviving than our peers back at Aperture Science, with the considerable number of survivors from the Black Mesa incident. We know that Magnuson, Eli, Kleiner, Barney, Rosenberg, and other minor characters like Simmons and Walter survived.
Hey, we really didn't try and save anyone, guys. Hey, Rosenberg, should we wait for more people?
Shut the f*** up, it's every man for themselves!
Dude, I really think we should.
Get in the fucking car, you dumbass! We need to cook meth, Jesse! We need to get out of here, Calhoun!
I got balls of steel.
But now, let's shift our focus to the fall of Aperture Science, the final nail in the coffin, if you will, which can be traced back to his developments into brain mapping, an initiative created due to K. Johnson's illness to moon rock poisoning, essentially ordering his scientists to pour his mind into a computer that would allow him to live forever. However, such plans would not come to fruition, resulting in his personal assistant, Carolyn, being forced in his place instead. And out of this, an artificial intelligence system came into being, acronymed as GLaDOS. During consecutive activations, this AI system would turn out to be extremely hostile to the employees of Aperture Science within mere picoseconds. These results eventually led to the creation of personality constructs as an attempt to dampen her thoughts of killing. Thereafter, the AI insisted that she had lost all homicidal thoughts and only craved for science, leading her to ask permission to conduct an experiment involving cats and a bit of neurotoxin. Knowing Aperture's mentality of trying to do anything for the sake of science, they allow it, of course.
Alright, so let's see what's on the bucket list. Cats, and especially neurotoxin. In bold text even. So let's make sure we get that for the next test.
Wait a minute, so you're telling me we're gonna take orders from an artificially intelligent machine?
Yes.
That has tried to kill us every time within picoseconds it is activated and has sparked many incidents in the past.
Yeah.
And we're now going to give it neurotoxin to quote-unquote test with?
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing suspicious or off about that?
Yup.
Alright, let's go get ourselves some neurotoxin in cats. Nothing could go wrong.
If I were you, I'd take a deep breath and hold it. The enrichment center.
After the facility's eventual lockdown during Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, the majority of the personnel would have simultaneously perished to the neurotoxin, with the remaining survivors being trapped within the enrichment center, each one being picked off one by one, forgotten underground as the Black Mesa incident would occur a week later. To make matters worse, the world would be plunged into a full-scale invasion of an interdimensional empire shortly after. From this point forward, any expectations of a cavalry to arrive, or a ticket out for you and your remaining colleagues are reduced to 0. The only named character we know survived, and possibly the last one, was Doug Ratman. And at this point, the fate of Doug Ratman within Aperture Science following his encounter with sentry turrets at the end of the Lab Rat comic remains a subject of speculation. But let's see who happened to survive somehow, despite the odds. Assuming that Portal 1 is set during the 2010s, that means that Ratman would have been confined within Aperture Science for around a decade, and would have not had the opportunity to break free until after the events of Portal 1. And even despite his brief escape, he wasn't able to bury the mental trauma he had to endure, losing his grip on reality and his sanity.
Listen, it's too dangerous. You're going to get killed.
So be it. But I am done running. I have to at least try to save her.
Then you really are crazy.
I am not crazy! Look, I'll prove it to you. See this? This right here is a drawing I made where I saw all my friends and coworkers die. I even drew you in it.
Okay, dude, what the fuck?
When it comes down to it, the chances of surviving this incident is exceptionally low when compared to the survival rate of the Black Mesa incident. The facility is monitored 24/7, and your best bet for surviving is taking refuge behind the wall panels. But it really makes you think that at that point, you're not living anymore, you're just surviving. You would practically go insane spending all that time in isolation, knowing that everyone you knew within and outside Aperture Science has either perished or is forever beyond reach. By that state, the Enrichment Center would have become a purgatory for you and the few dozen scientists that are left to be picked off, one by one. In summary, what are the key takeaways throughout the runtime of this video? Well, it's that ultimately, Black Mesa emerges victorious, albeit to a limited extent. First of all, it becomes complicated to declare Black Mesa as a definitive winner when considering the counter-arguments, the most notable one being that Black Mesa caused a resonance cascade and was inadvertently responsible for the Combine invasion. But that also brings up an opposing argument that can be made against that point, which is that Aperture Science had tests going wrong left and right on a regular basis to begin with. These failed tests in question resulted in entire portions of the facility being sealed off, and hundreds if not thousands of people losing their lives. And that's not to mention that all the personnel perished within the facility. In comparison, the resonance cascade was the only test that went wrong for Black Mesa, that we know of at least. But wow, what kind of one-time unforeseen consequence is that, right? Nevertheless, just from looking at the hazards, chances of survival, and other variables present in the equation, Black Mesa appears as a safer and more ideal workplace. Though that isn't to say that Black Mesa is perfect. The workplace is in fact more perilous in your run-of-the-mill work environment. Regardless of that, when Black Mesa is put next to Aperture Science, which exists in a constant state of absurdism, with its unethicalness towards its personnel and Saturday morning cartoon experiments, Black Mesa appears as the more welcoming candidate out of the morally gray.